What's going on, you guys? It's your boy 360 Stacks in this thing, baby, representing TKOG. Today I'm coming at you guys with the top 10 best decks of the format. This is post B.O.D.E, so I do have the two new archetypes here, and there are quite a few staples that do shake things up a bit. I think Live Twins definitely got a huge boost as well. So there's a lot to talk about. I want to keep things short. I will say, if your deck is not on this list, it's no personal attack towards you. Please do not take offense. Always make sure that you have thick skin when you're watching videos online in general on the internet. You know, no one's attacking you for not having your deck on the list. No one's thinking that your deck sucks. This is based off representation, results, speculation, the actual experience that I have playing these decks, and their ceilings comparatively amongst each other. Some of these decks just have a better matchup against the other decks that you're going to see more often. That's what's going to give them an edge. Some of these decks just have more flex in the terms of playing staples, hand traps, defensive cards. Some of these decks are just more consistent than the others. Consistency, representation, results, and the overall ceiling, I think, matters more than anything. Ceiling could be high on the deck, but ceiling to me is what the deck's able to do. Like, ceiling should be a combination of the consistency and what it does, because if a deck can FTK you, it's not going to be tier 1 if it's not consistent enough to do it through multiple hand traps at that, and to be able to do it in like a 12-round tournament. It's a pretty big deal. So ceiling to me is just overall what the deck's capable of doing. So a deck ceiling could be really high, in my opinion, if it's like able to FTK you, or just it sets up like a 7-negate board. But then if it's resiliency and its consistency, resiliency being its ability to play through multiple hand traps, and its consistency being that can it do this more often than not without bricking, and also in a 12-round tournaments, can you rely on this deck, you know? So with all that being said, I think that those things are the biggest factors in making a deck tier 1, or even just one of the best decks of the format. If you guys agree with me, let me know. But yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. Click the notification bell if you have. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know how I did in the comment section below. And if you want to back me and support my channel, please consider becoming a channel member. I mean, not a channel member. Please consider becoming a Discord channel member. And also, if you want to back me on Patreon, I would greatly appreciate that as well. So let's get started, you guys. A lot to talk about, like I said. So everything I said in the beginning of the video is going to pretty much just be justified by the choices I have on this list, because all of those things factored in to make these decks in the spot that they are, and in this specific order as well. So at number 10, I have Flounders. I know some people be like, oh yeah, you're tripping. This deck's tier 1, it's broken. It should be like in the number 2 spot. This deck, it's not that I'm underestimating this deck, it's that people are overestimating this deck and even Sword Souls. These are very great new additions, and they're a breath of fresh air because they're very unique decks that we really haven't seen a playstyle like these in a while. This deck is really good at what it does. It sets up, obviously, just floodgates, disruptions. It has a great grind game. Honestly, one of the best grind games out of all these decks. This deck has one of the best grind games. You have access to cards like Impin, Ryza, Stormwinds, and Avion. These are your main heavy hitters. You can recycle these cards. You can use Ryza. You can loop Dimensional Shifter. Your main deck is pretty much just on crack when it comes to just the recursion that this deck has. These floodgates can beat almost every deck on this list. Some matchups are more favorable, like Virtual Worlds, I think, have a more favorable matchup against Flounders. I think Trap Eldritch doesn't really care too much about Flounders. There's a few decks that can play in these, like, I say, in the situations that Flounders would put you in, when their engine's able to actually play and they don't get, you know, impermed and just pass turn to one imperm. The deck is really, really good, and it can beat almost deck on this list. But we have to consider, how good is this deck at playing through hand traps, and it's not. How good is this deck at going second, playing in turbulence, playing through disruptions? It's not that great. Is it impossible? No. Any deck on this list can break a board, and they can break some of the best boards at that. But it's, can your engine do it? That's the big question here. Because sure, in theory, every single deck on this list could break a board. If they prevented the board from happening with hand traps, there's not really much of a board to break. But can you break the actual board that a deck can make? Like, when you don't draw the hand trap, is your engine good enough to break that board? Like, if you see a Dragon Link board, can you break the Dragon Link board with just your engine? Sometimes you draw really crack. Some people just negate your prosperity, and you don't have to worry about them negating your actual engine cards. But The question here is, can your engine break the board? So the deck's engine is not resilient enough through disruptions and hand traps for me to put it any higher. It's the most fragile deck on this list. Every single deck on this list has a higher ceiling playing through hand traps than this deck in particular. And on top of that, the deck is not as consistent as people think it is. You kind of have to play Duality and like Extrav or Prosperity if you want this deck to be able to be as consistent as the other decks on this list. And even at that, you're still going to draw unplayable hands. Trust me when I say I'm speaking from experience. But coming in at number 9, we have Sword Souls. This deck arguably has a better engine than Flounders, just in the terms of consistency and resilience. I do think that Flounders is a bit more unfair. It definitely can just completely lock you out of the game, but that's not always going to be the thing that makes a deck the best. To me, what makes a deck better is when it's more consistent, when it has a higher ceiling going second, when it also, its engine is just able to do more, you know, with just less. I think that Flounders have like a unique playstyle, and they definitely are good at what they do, but their toolbox is not as vast or diverse as Sword Souls, and that's another reason why Sword Soul is going to be a better deck. And Sword Soul also is really good against this deck, ironically enough. It has a really good Flunder matchup, believe me when I say. So Sword Souls, yeah, they have in-archetype extenders, they have 1-card starters, well, like 1.5 card starters. You have access to the Tinny cards and the Enforcer engine. Tinny makes your deck more consistent. Enforcer gives you a better defensive backbone, which does put a big emphasis on the grind game, because this deck doesn't have a grind game that's as good as Flounders. Arguably, this deck doesn't really get much follow-up. You have really beefy boards. You can end on multiple negate boards with also a really, really good trap card at that. This deck is really good. I'm not saying that it's bad. Is it tier 1? No. I don't think anything that's in like the first 3 spots is not really tier 1. They're good enough to beat the tier 1 decks, but they're not tier 1 in my opinion. And that's what really, it's like I try my best to use the facts to enhance my decisions, like being that my decisions are more or less based off facts, but then I still have my own opinion, which also is another reason why these decks are in the spot that they're in. So yeah, I do think that Sword Soul is definitely going to be one of the better decks in the new format, but it's definitely not better than like everything that's above it, because these cards, like all these decks are above it for a reason. Like these decks are definitely being overhyped, but I will say, I would never say that these decks are bad. I would never say that these decks cannot beat the other decks on this list. These decks are just A, not as consistent, B, not as resilient, and C, not as great, you know, just their inboards are not going to be as good sometimes. Like if you open Insane with these decks, obviously your inboard can be better, but more often than not, the realistic feel is you're going to end on 2, maybe 3 disruptions with Sword Souls. With Flounders, you might just get the nuts, and you might be able to set up Ryza into Stormwinds, but like that's like the best you've got, you know? And that's all that the deck really has to offer. Like that's the meat, that's the bread and the butter. Like that is the best that this deck can do. So sometimes the best that these decks have is just not good enough for other decks. You know, their engines are just better. I'm sorry to say. Their engines are. Speaking of an engine that's just better, I'm coming in at number 8. Let me check my timer here. I feel like Flunder and Sword Soul took so much of my time. I really want to explain that because I feel like a lot of people are going to get their feelings hurt, and I'm not trying to hurt feelings. I'm just being honest, you guys. And I think I said that in the beginning of the video, but yeah, don't take anything as a personal attack. You know, I'm not throwing shade at any of these decks. I'm just being realistic. Eldritch is definitely a better deck than both of these. Not only because its engine is just better, its engine is more compact, meaning that you have a bigger flexibility in the terms of your deck building composition. There's a lot more that you can tech into Eldritch than either one of these. Its engine has a very, very good grind game. You have good disruptions as well. Your counter trap's good, Conquistador's good, Wakero is really good. Golden Lord's an amazing card, going first and going second. You have access to all the good floodgates besides TC Boo. You have access to decks like the Dogmatica deck, the Invoke deck, the Evil Twin deck. I mean, heck, you can actually play a majority of the meta decks here with an Eldritch engine. And that's just what makes Eldritch that much better, that the emphasis on its splashability is what gives it such a high ceiling. The Eldritch deck by itself is also really, really good. If you're playing a trap-based Eldritch, Trap Eldritch has had such a good track record. There have been 60-card trap decks, like 60-card pile trap decks with the Eldritch engine in the past that have definitely dominated. Right now, there's a few Trap Eldritch decks running around. I mean, this is just a deck that's kind of just always going to be here. And I don't think that it's ever going to be hit on the ban list, so get used to it. I do have the Zombie engine here because I think this is a really good meta call. Even if you're playing Trap Eldritch, I would recommend the Rivalry, the Zombie World package, and the Super Polys. They give you a higher ceiling going second, a better capability at breaking boards, some more solid disruptions. This Floodgate just locks Drytrons in. It really kind of manipulates what stuff can even resolve in the first place. Flounders can't really play. It makes it really, really hard for you to be able to use some of your Drytron cards, like your Ritual Spell. It just kind of just kills Eva. It's really powerful against Drytrons and Dragon Link, and honestly, those are two of the best decks in this list. So it's really, really powerful. Like, Zombie Eldritch is something that you definitely want to consider in the new format, especially with just Rivalry being the powerhouse that it is. So yeah, this deck is definitely better than these. I'm sorry, you guys. It's just the truth. Eldritch is an amazing deck. And something that's also key to note is this is the only deck on this list that doesn't lose to Imperm, Cypher Gear Gamma, or Effect Veiler, or even Nibiru. The only hand traps that even work against this deck that you will see people playing will be Ash and Bell. You're not going to see a lot of Meister and Crow, and that's just the truth. The only other hand trap that could impact this deck is Shifter, but it doesn't really impact this deck the way people think. It's not like a blowout, like a turn-ending thing. You can play Dimensional Shifter in Eldritch. That's another unique thing, because I know some people are going to be playing Shifter in their Flunder deck, and I just wanted to point that out. But coming in at number 6, we have Live Twins / Evil Twins. This deck is just really, really good. Its engine is very compact. You have main deck R-type specific extenders that let you play through even Gamma. The fact that you can play through Gamma with your own R-type specific card like Live Twin Home is really incredible. You can push through Ash and Imperm just by opening either Frost Treat or the cards that search them, like Sunny Snitch, or even Secret Password, or the quick play emergency teleport that the deck has. Honestly, this deck is really incredible. It's good with link climbing, drawing, spot removal, and consistent pressure. Everything that you draw is normally a disruption because you can play so many good trap cards, good hand traps, and good tech cards. That's what makes this deck so good. Its grind game's not the best. You will burn through your twins pretty fast. Sunny is a great addition to this deck. This is a big deal. This card is a very, very big deal. It's huge. It's good. It has a spot removal the deck naturally didn't have. We also have like a pseudo evening match, which is just something that you can experiment with. The deck's really good in time, and it's very, very consistent. There's nothing bad you could say about this deck. It's not that it's unfair, it's that its engine is so good. And that you can play 20 non-engine cards in this deck. So you could play borderline 15 hand traps and just a cross-out designator package just to make your deck able to play through more disruptions. Like, it's just really, really good, you guys. Coming in at number... wait, this is number 7, number 6. Number 5, we have Prankids. So wait, let me make sure I'm doing this right. We have 10, 9, 8, 7. Okay, my bad. Number 6. Prankids is number 6. Prankids is a better deck than Live Twins. It has a better track record. It's tried and true. Meow Meow got hit to 1 for a reason, but the deck isn't really, like, unplayable. In fact, it's arguably just as good as it's been. The follow-up is diminished just a little bit, just in the convoluted to, like, turns where you have literally just one prank to go off on your next turn. But more often than not, your engine just gives you so much follow-up that it naturally doesn't really matter. As long as you're getting access to pranks at the end of the day, you have your extender to be able to make your doodle on your follow-up with or without Meow Meow. So that's not really a big deal. This is the best deck in time. This engine, it's just really, really powerful. It also plays through disruptions better than Live Twin. It's able to beat cards like Nibiru, consistently playing through Gamma, Ash. Veiler and Imperm deck, those are the worst hand traps to use against this deck because you can just keep summoning new copies of Doodle Doodle Doo and just add the same cards that you would have added off Doodle anyways. If your Doodle gets ashed or Impermed or Veiler, Fansies can just send the card Doodle was going to search. This deck's just super duper resilient. It has an amazing grind game. Its engine is pretty compact, so you can play a lot of hand traps and tech cards just like Evil Twins or Live Twins, I would say. I timed out here. I'm sorry. Hopefully, I just load back in immediately. My bad about that. Yeah, but Prankids, honestly, yeah. And their track record is really, really good. This deck has one of the highest win rates I've ever seen for a deck that you would consider to be a joke. And it's been around for a very, very long time. So, yeah, you guys, Prankids are definitely meta. I would say that their engine is basically tier 1.5. The only tier 1 decks that I see in this list are definitely going to be the next 5. So we're going to go back in. I'm going to go into new deck. The name is new meta. There we go. All right, so new meta. So this is where my little list is here. So yeah, Prinkets. And there's also not much that I can say about this deck that hasn't been said already. It's very annoying at that. And it's very, very flexible, you guys. Very resilient, tried and true. Prinkets is just phenomenal. Coming in at number 5. Oh yeah, and I do have to note that if you're playing the Poly Engine, you have access to Totally Awesome and rank 4s like Abyss Dweller. That's a really big deal. And on top of that, this deck can play Mystic Mine. And there's not very many decks that can just out Mystic Mine without drawing like a Twin or a Cosmic. So yeah, coming in at number 5, we have Shadal's. So Shadal Invoke Dogmatic specifically is like just insane, you guys. Not even like, it is just insane. This deck is a powerhouse. This deck is so good at what it does. This is the only deck really specifically on this list whose engine is good enough to break every board that's being made right now. Outside of, I'd say, maybe this deck that's making Stormwinds, but you could still summon Raijin and just Book of Moon this with your Invoke cards, and that'll help you to just play through the Stormwinds. So I definitely believe firmly, not only because Shadal's have had such a good track record, I mean, heck, the deck's iconic, it's been hit on the ban list, and it's stuck around. The deck has access to some of the most powerful cards in the game. You have Nadir Servant, Shadal Fusion, Meltdown, the Invoke Engine. You have cards like Prosperity, Triple Tactics Talents, Forbidden Droplets. You just have so many good staples. Its engine is so powerful. You can actually break the Dragon League, the Drytron board, and the Virtual World board without drawing a single hand trap, even no droplets, no talents needed. Its engine is just that good, you guys. This deck is actually broken. I know it might seem like it's biased because I love Shadal's myself, but I am purely speaking not only just off of representation results, a good track record, the ceiling, but also from experience. And also, a good Shadal player can beat every single deck on this list. This deck's engine is just so powerful. It's the only deck on this list outside of Dragon Links that doesn't need to play hand traps. You don't even need to play Dark Roller and Droplets. It's just that good. You have powerhouse cards, like I said, like the Nadir is so powerful. Nadir Servant's one of the best cards in the game. Magical Meltdown giving you protection so that you don't even have to worry about chain blocking. You have El Shadal Fusion. This deck has one of the best Tri-Brigade matchups, one of the best Eldritch matchups, one of the best Prinkid matchups, Live Twins. The only deck that really would just completely lock you out without you being able to do much would be Flounders if you don't draw the out to Stormwinds, because there's still cards like Nadir Servant that can out the Stormwinds. You still have Raijin if you're playing the Wind Fusion. You have access to Winda and Kaliga, which literally just beats every deck on this list that's not Trap Eldritch, but Trap Eldritch is your best matchup. You just beat that deck naturally. You don't need any hand traps. You have access to just like I said, just the best cards. This deck's engine is so incredibly good, you guys. Honestly, just Shadal Fusion alone can out the Tri-Brigade board and the Virtual World board by itself. You have Super Poly just to deal with the ultimateness. You have Shadal Aerial, which kills Eldritch. It kills the Drytron follow-ups. It can kill the Virtual World and the Tri-Brigade follow-ups. You also have to keep in mind how powerful El Shadal Fusion is at being able to prevent Revolt to even be activated. So in your Tri-Brigade matchup, not only can you contend easily with Apollousa and Double Dragon Lords and their hand traps, but the fact that you can just chain El Shadal Fusion to Revolt, summoning Winda so that it will fizzle, even if they want to use Double Dragon Lords to bounce Winda on resolution, the fact that you can make Winda hit the field first and Revolt will not even be able to resolve, that is a big deal. And Meltdown having that protection is a big deal, because you have stuff like, let's say, for example, you activated El Shadal Fusion or Shadal Fusion, they would have to chain Revolt at the offset chance that you would summon Winda, right? Like, more specifically, the El Shadal Fusion, like when you're making power plays and your engine's going, when you activate cards like El Shadal Fusion, at the offset chance that they would summon Winda, and also at the offset chance that they would send Dragon, sometimes you have to chain Revolt. And the reason being is because if you send Dragon with Meltdown up and you target Revolt, even if you didn't summon Winda, now they can't even chain it. And they can't chain Apollousa to negate because of Meltdown. So you just have situations where you kind of force Tri-Brigade's hand. And this is one of the best decks on this list. This is arguably, some people still think is the best deck. And Shaddolls have such a good matchup against this deck. They have such a good matchup against all the decks that quote quote are better than it, because these decks are on a higher place on this list than Shaddolls. You guys definitely want to take this deck seriously. This deck is no joke. Winda and Kaliga just win games by themselves. The only deck that can even play under those stipulations is going to be Eldritch, because it doesn't really need a special summon a lot. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't really need monster effects either. Other than that, Winda Kaliga claps every single deck on this list, and your engine is good enough to break boards where you don't even need hand traps. Like, you just have access to, like I said, just the best cards. You out Dragoon consistently. You can out every board that's being made except for the Stormwinds, unless you draw, like, specifically, like, not even specifically, because you have, like, 7 Alistairs, and you have not only the 3 Nadirs, but you have the Ecclesia and the Punishment. So, yeah, deck is just phenomenal, you guys. Coming in at number 4, I have Tri-Brigade. The only reason why I personally put Tri-Brigade over Shaddolls is just because it has a better track record. It just has been getting better results than Shaddolls, but I will say Shaddolls are not being played as frequently as Tri-Brigade, so they have high representation. The deck ceiling is really, really high, and its inboards are really good. Its follow-ups are incredible. It has a decent grind game. It's not as good going second as almost every deck on this list. It's very similar to Flunder and Sword Souls, being that it doesn't play through disruptions as good as other decks. You can fold to just 1 Imperm if you don't draw a Karaz. Why is this deck on a higher place? For the simple fact that Tri-Brigades have had a good track record for a really long time. This deck normally tops most events that is being played in. It has a high representation, a good turnout, and it can play arguably more check cards and hand traps than both Sword Souls and also Flunderies can. So you can play a lot more anti-meta staples and, you know, meta hate like hand traps, floodgates, you name it. This deck is really, really strong, you guys. Not much to say about it that hasn't been said already. I don't think that this deck its engine is good though, like at breaking boards. It's just like, you need hand traps to play this deck, you need tech cards, because like, you can't really, it's not like Shaddolls, Dragon Link, Strytrons, or even Virtual World, where your engine can just break boards by itself, but it definitely does deserve the spot that it has. Coming in at number 3, we have Dragon Link. Yes, you guys, Dragon Link is in number 3. This deck has just been dominating ever since its initial inception. This deck is tried and true. It's been hit multiple times on ban lists, and it has survived and thrived. This deck is insane, you guys. Dragon Link is so good. It has an amazing grind game. It's very resilient. It plays through more hand traps than pretty much every deck on this list outside of, I would say, Shaddolls and arguably Drytrons. Like, Prank Hits, Shaddolls, Drytrons, Dragon Link, and sometimes Virtual Worlds are the only decks that can really play through up to 3 hand traps in the same turn. But yeah, you guys, Dragon Link is insane. Not only can its engine just break boards by itself, you set up some of the best boards in the game. You can set up 3 negates, 2 bounces, and great follow-ups with your hand traps. Your deck is just incredible, you guys. This deck is very, very consistent as well, and you can main deck quite a few techs. It's just so powerful, you guys. Dragon Link has had the best track record. As far as combo decks, it has the best track record right now. It's like the oldest combo deck right now that's still meta relevant. So there's not a lot I can take away from it. It is definitely a lot more insane than Tri-Brigade. And some people like this deck better than Shaddolls. It's just super consistent. It doesn't really lose to a lot of hand traps either. You can consistently beat Droll because you can play the Dragoon engine. You also can still end on Savage through a Droll plus Seal, which is really, really incredible. Depending on the composition of your hand, you can play through 3 high impact hand traps with this deck. It's just such a great deck, you guys. Its ceiling is really high, and its inboards can beat pretty much every deck that I would say is not going to be Shaddolls and maybe Trap Eldritch. Its engine's just really, really good, you guys. There's not much to say about Dragon Link that hasn't already been said. It definitely deserves its spot. It's a lot better than Tri-Brigades. Trust me when I say that. I know some people just like Tri-Brigades better, but believe me when I say Dragon Link is the better deck. Coming in at number 2, we have Virtual Worlds. So Virtual World is not the most consistent deck, I would say that. But I will say it's also because of how people are building it. Currently, I have a list right now that's playing Foolish Burial Goods, Pot of Desires, and Prosperity. And I will say I have not bricked a single time. And I think moving forward, that is how you're going to want to play this deck. Because if you want Virtual Worlds to be the powerhouse that it is, you need to make sure that you're always drawing your engine. Because your engine just like Shadow's in Dragon Link, just can break boards naturally going second without drawing hand traps. You have some of the best in boards in the game. I mean, we were talking about Drytrons, Tri-Brigades. I forgot to point out, their extra deck staples that they normally go for. I forgot to mention what a powerhouse Omen is, but you guys have seen this card being summoned against you probably 20 times. Dragon Link, I should have pointed out some of their main heavy hitters being the Seals. But now we're talking about Virtual World. So, yeah, Virtual World can end on Kaliga or Dragoon, plus Crystal Wing, Shinshin, and Chuchi, which is one of the best boards it can make. Not only that, its grind game is incredible. Its engine can naturally just outgrind trap decks and other control and mid-range based decks. It has such an aggressive playstyle when necessary, but also can just play at the mid-range style that you normally would want to play with it. It also, again, its biggest flaw is its consistency, but when you draw your engine, it's so good going second. It's so good going first. It's an incredible deck. It has so many of the best cards in the game. You have access to cards like Zeus, Dragoon, Kaliga, Crystal Wing. You have access to Shinshin. You have rank 3s, rank 6s, and rank 9s. There's just so many options when it comes to the toolbox of this deck. It is just phenomenal. Virtual Worlds definitely deserve the number 2 spot. They're so good. I know some people would just say because it's not as consistent, but the thing is, it's not as consistent because of how people are building it. They're choosing hand traps over consistency cards, and I don't think that's correct. I truly believe if you want your Virtual Worlds to thrive, you need to choose consistency over hand traps. Stop playing 12, 15 hand traps. Play some consistency cards in the deck. You will not have the issues that the deck naturally has. The problem is people are playing like no pots. They're not playing goods, and they're playing all these hand traps, and that's what's really keeping them, it's holding them back. I will say that this deck really doesn't need to play hand trap. You could honestly just main deck Dark Rulers, Talents, or even Mystic Mind, or all of them, and you will do extremely well. You'll do way better with those cards than you will with hand traps. I'm speaking from experience. And if you guys didn't already know, Drytron is definitely the best deck of the format, you guys. This deck is not only tried and true with an incredible track record, its ceiling is the highest. It can play through more hand traps than almost every deck on this list. It has main deck outs to its Achilles heel. This is one of the few decks where, these decks all have something that is a natural weakness that some other decks will be playing. And I will say, this is one of the few decks that actually beats the worst hand trap against it, or it's the strongest hand trap against it. This deck has main deck outs to Droll and Lockbird in the form of Herald of the Orange Light, Crossout Designator, Called by the Grave, and Instant Fusion. And on top of that, if you didn't draw any of those cards, you can still consistently end on IP Masquerena, Baethor with Dragoon under Droll. It's insane how powerful this deck is. You have access to main deck boss monsters where you don't even need your extra deck to do your dirty work. You can use cards like Draconids, the Megalith cards, Natasha, and Ultimatus to do a lot of the work that this deck naturally does. Your engine is so good. These decks right here, like Dragon Link, Drytron, and Virtual Worlds, have phenomenal grind games. These Shaddolls, Brain Kids, and Eldritch have the best grind game on this list. I would say Flunder is up there too, but just because they're not able to get their engine going through multiple hand traps, it's not going to be as good, but they definitely have an incredible grind game as well. But yeah, Drytrons is just one of those decks where if you break its board and do not OTK it, it sometimes doesn't even matter because its engine's just going to play out of its grave on the next turn, and it's just going to be really problematic, especially when it's able to just ritual summon Natasha. It's really OP. This deck is really, really good, you guys. Almost all of its going first cards can be going second cards. Just the Drytron cards are so good at forcing disruptions. Mubeta Fafnir is one of the most broken rank ones I've ever seen in my life. This deck can not only make Zeus a powerhouse, but also use it as a combo piece. And it can hard summon Arclight, it can hard summon cards like Savage and Ruler. You can synchro for level 7s, you can just do so much with this deck. It's very, very versatile, it's very good, it's OP. This is the best deck of the format. Not only because it has the best in board right now, which is the least susceptible to anything that's not Dark Ruler and Droplets. You need the cream of the crop to break this deck's board, but then you'll still have Orange Lights in hand if you do draw the Dark Ruler. And then on top of that, if you break the board, it doesn't matter if you can't OTK. Very similar to Virtual Worlds, you have to break the board and kind of go after the grave. And that is why before I end this video, I want to put a huge emphasis on why Shaddolls are so good right now. Because they can not only break the board, but if they don't OTK, they set up not only a follow-up that doesn't let you play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being Kliga or Winda, but they also have Ariel to hit the graveyard follow-ups of King Long, Shin Shin, and even sometimes they can hit the Drytron names that you would use on your follow-ups. If you just Ariel for 3 Drytron names, normally it doesn't really matter that they couldn't play under Winda's circumstances anyways. If they had an Alta Winda, they wouldn't be able to play Yu-Gi-Oh! So yeah, any deck that can not only break the board, but if it doesn't OTK, can take your follow-ups away, should definitely be praised for that. I definitely think that Shaddolls are one of the best decks in this format, and they just have so much going for them. I definitely want you guys to consider the reason why these 5 decks right here are better than these 5 decks. I have very good reasons for why they're in the places that they are in. Let me know what you guys think. It's always open for debate. You can always argue my face off about why you think that Battery Mans are the best deck in the world. You know, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and this game is so great because you don't have to play any of these decks to do good. These are just the decks that are more sought after than other decks. But with that said, God bless you guys. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. Stay tuned for future content, and y'all be safe and have a wonderful day. Peace.